Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the mysterious and unusual literature that I have found in my travels, and I also attempt to bust the myths put forward by the big parenthood lobby from time to time as well. Today, I wanted to talk about a book that I've read on this very special Friday. This is a book about children and single parents and evil people. I am referring to No David by David Shannon. For those who don't know, David Shannon is a writer and illustrator known for writing most primarily the No David series, where he illustrates how a young child named David wreaks havoc and does generally terrible things in his day-to-day experiences. This particular story is about his home life, but there are other stories about when he goes out and about to school and whatnot. He's won multiple awards, David Shannon, not the character David, and he's also from Washington State, which is interesting. Most of the time, the people of Washington State are high quality, but David Shannon might actually be a terrible human being in disguise. We don't know. That's what we're here to find out. So without further ado, let's talk about No David. I'll do a brief summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So No David focuses on an apparently single mom and a bratty son, David. I say single, but there's a photo in the story with a man in it, but there is no man in the story himself. No father figure for David. So I'm left to assume that the father has either abandoned the family, taken away from David, or he has died, which is lucky for him because he doesn't have to deal with David now. And of course, David is a bratty son doing pretty terrible things throughout the story, and is depicted as being a hideous goblin creature in the process. Clearly intentional on David Shannon's part. David writes on the walls. He tracks mud in the house despite the fact that the mother will have to clean this up, and it even lowers the property value, so David clearly doesn't think when he should be doing that. He runs throughout the neighborhood naked, which would bring great shame upon his family. Clearly he doesn't care about the reputation of his family, or he's actively trying to ruin it. He gets rowdy, he gets messy, writing on the walls, and generally having a very rowdy time in the bath, which only leaves a bigger mess that his mom will have to pick up. And near the end of the story, he breaks a vase, which might have been of great value. And as a result, he is sent to the corner for a punishment, which is a bit too light, in my opinion. He should be exiled from the home because of his actions. And while he is in the corner, he emotionally manipulates his mother by turning his face and pouting, as children often do. And because of this, the mother realizes her love for the child and embraces David. A sort of happy ending, but not so happy once you realize he's probably going to do this tomorrow and the next day and the next day for 18 years until the mother is finally free of David and can kick him out of the house without consequence. But the story seemingly ends on that positive note right there. In terms of analysis, there is a lot of good and some bad to talk about with this story. One of the best things about this story, the thing that David Shannon hits pretty hard, is that this is the truest depiction of children, in my opinion. Because mostly in children's stories, you see very positive depictions of children. Often lies, outright lies, where they're wholesome and good, and they're the future, or they're depicted as not really capable of doing bad. Which isn't really accurate to how children actually are. In this story, David is depicted as being chaotic, evil, rude, burdensome, actively trying to damage his mother's reputation, ruining all the cleaning that his mother has done in this story. And so I feel like this is an accurate depiction of children because this is how children actually are. They are chaotic and evil, actively going out of their way to harm people in their lives. And people say, oh, they don't know better. They're still young. But no, they actively do know better. And I think they communicate to one another to make things even worse. Like we want to pretend that they're wholesome, but deep down below the surface, we know that they are just the absolute worst type of people who plot and scheme and strategize to make things worse for everyone around them. And they actively engage in emotional manipulation, which is what David does in this story. When he is punished rightfully for what he's done, he turns around and gives his mother a frowny face and pretends that he's crying and doesn't understand why he's being punished. But he clearly does understand why he's being punished. So he manipulates his mother into feeling guilt so that she will embrace him and forget about what he's done. And the real tragic aspect of this story is that he's going to do this the next day and the next day and the next day. And he's going to suck the life out of his mother, whose only crime was giving birth to him and not tossing him, out of a window when she had the chance. I think it's really good that Shannon gets at this emotional manipulation and highlights, children need to be exiled from society, sent to an island like Napoleon, or perhaps, shot into space on a rocket, preferably into the sun. But some people might claim that that's a bit harsh. So maybe we should send them to the moon instead, exile them to the moon, perhaps let them form a moon colony, although that might be a bit of a troublesome sort of thing, because they might grow up, form a moon army and launch a war against us for doing the right thing and sending them there when they clearly deserve it. But that's a consequence for the future of humanity. I'm probably going to be dead by the time those children grow up and launch their moon armies. So, we don't have to worry about it. Let's just do it now and forget about it. It's also interesting because you can clearly see allusions to the grapes of wrath and know David. Because much like how the big banks and the corporation oppress the small farmers and the workers who are traveling from Oklahoma to California in the search of a better life, so too is David oppressing his mother. The mom is like the humble farmers. She only wants what's best for her family, for those around her. She is good and wholesome, and there might have been some bad things that she's done in the past, but ultimately she's just fighting for survival, for her way of life, for trying to provide a better future for everyone and for herself, to make ends meet. And David represents that of the banks, of the corporate farmers, who see the kindness and the desire to avoid confrontation of his mother, and they exploit that as much as possible. And the end result is the humble mom is left to fend in the wake of this greedy, terrible child. And if you ask me, David is one to call the police, much like how the corporate farmers would call the police in the future if David's mom didn't do what he wanted. So it's clear that David Shannon is trying to make allusions to John Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath and many of his other stories, which I would appreciate if it wasn't for what happened in the end of the story, because it feels like David Shannon cops out in the end of the story. It has a bit of an unrealistic ending, because rather than selling David back to an orphanage or exiling him out of civilization as a whole, David's mom succumbs to her son's emotional manipulation and forgives him and gives him a giant hug. And it seems as if the message is that we all deserve forgiveness in the end, which seems like a big cop-out, because David clearly doesn't deserve forgiveness for all of his terrible actions of bringing shame upon his family by running around naked and ruining the property value of his mother's home by writing on the walls and tracking in dirt. That's not going to be easy to clean out the carpet, David. That's going to be very difficult. And so I have to wonder, was David Shannon afraid to follow through on his message here and highlight the true nature of children? Or did something worse happen? Did the big parenthood lobby that we're all familiar with, did that finally get to him and force him to capitulate and write an ending that was more wholesome and less realistic? Or even worse, does David Shannon have children? Did he or did a child get to him and convince him through force or other insidious means to write a different ending than he had previously intended? If that's the case, that's really sad, because David Shannon has been compromised by children. I myself would never allow myself to be compromised by a child. If I see a child, I tell it that it is deserving of scorn and should be exiled out of society, and I do not let it emotionally manipulate me. But David Shannon appears to not be as strong as the rest of us. And so as a result, you end up with this weak ending that could have been much better had David Shannon held out from this torture from children in the end. Anyway, those are my thoughts on No David, a true insight into the world that children offer of complete devastation and harm and emotional manipulation and mental trauma. It's clear that if you have children, it's not going to end well for you. I would urge everyone out there, if you're thinking of being a parent, consider otherwise. And if you're already a parent, put those kids in an orphanage or, exile them out of society or let them march off into the woods before it's too late, before the worst comes to pass. If you read this story before, you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about No David, unless you're part of the big parenthood lobby, in which case get out of here. I don't want to talk with you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this important story, and we can spread the message that children are wrong and terrible and are to be avoided at all cost. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and childish and foolish travels. Farewell.